The biggest challenge for new AI automation freelancers is not building solutions, it's finding clients who are ready to pay. And the truth is, it's not easy, especially when you're just starting out, like I was. I get it, I've been there as well. However, I discovered a framework that changed everything for me and helped me become a top rated freelancer on Upwork, start my own AI automations agency, as well as teach over 500 others how to master and sell AI automation. But today, I'm going to show you the best place I've found to find AI and automation clients in 2025. And I'll explain why one method stands above all the rest for beginners like you. So it wouldn't be a good video without another diagram. So I'm going to share with you this framework that I first discovered in Alex Hormozi's $100 million leads book. And I'd highly recommend you checking that out if you're seeking your first client or trying to set up an agency as well. We'll run through each of the ways that you can acquire clients at a broad level and then talk about why one platform stands above the rest. So at a high level, you can see there are 4 different ways in general that you can acquire clients. Be warm, i.e. we know the people or we roughly know those people, or they could be cold, people we don't know. So the framework puts how well we know the person on the y-axis, and then on the x-axis on the bottom, it has how many people we're contacting with that outreach. So for example, warm outreach would be one-to-one contact with anyone that we're familiar with. So this could be messaging your friends from WhatsApp, Telegram, LinkedIn, but it's all one-to-one and we know those people. Then got warm broadcasts where we know the audience, but we're actually posting content around it. So this could be if you've started up an agency and you're actually posting about the automations that you build and you're posting on LinkedIn about those. We then move to people that we don't know. So actually we're starting to contact people via cold outreach. It could be cold calling. It could be door-to-door sales. And then finally we have cold broadcasts. So again, we don't know the people, but we're broadcasting to a wider audience that's outside of our network, but also we're doing it on one-to-many basis. So this could be something like Google ads, Facebook ads, any adverts that we put out there, we are effectively broadcasting to people that we don't know. Now, those are fundamentally the 4 different ways you can acquire clients, and there's pros and cons to using each of these methods. The further we go along to people we don't know, the higher the cost of setup is going to be. So if we're, for example, using cold outreach emails, we need to warm our inbox for 90 days just to get those inboxes delivering correctly. And 2, we have the infrastructure setup cost. It's going to cost a little bit more to set up that infrastructure than just posting on our LinkedIn, which is completely free. So as we go towards the cold audience, it becomes more expensive, or they have different costs associated with them. So the warm outreach might be free, but the key cost we're going to see here is in our own time. If we're reaching out to our friends one-to-one or just people we know, if that's even an option for you, you might not have a network of people that actually you could reach out to with this stuff. Then that's going to be free, but it's going to be a time drain and it's going to take away our focus on our business. And instead, we're going to be focusing on every single one of those conversations and trying to convert them. Warm broadcast, again, we don't know if it's directed. It's free, but who's to say our LinkedIn audience is the audience we're trying to sell to? Cold outreach, we can be more specific. So for example, cold emails, we can pull leads for a certain customer persona, but it's going to cost a little more and take longer to start with. And then cold broadcast, fundamentally, this is going to cost us money. And this is the most expensive method. And you're going to pay in having to experiment here. So cold broadcast is a really good channel if you understand your customer persona. But in this early stage, if you're setting up an AI automation business, you might not have niched down yet, and you might not understand exactly who you're trying to contact, and therefore spend a lot of money if you go down the cold broadcast route. But fundamentally, if we are trying to acquire a client, these are the questions on screen that we're trying to answer. And they're things that need to be true for us to actually acquire a client or even appeal to a client. So does the client have a problem we can solve? Do they recognize they have the problem? Is now the right time? I.e., are they seeking a solution now? Do they even have budget authority? So they might have a problem, but can they permit any money to be spent on this solution? And then one of the most important factors is, do they trust us enough to give them the solution and pay us for that? So when we combine these factors with these different methods, for example, warm outreach to our network, if we have an existing network and this is even an option, do they have a problem you can solve? Who knows? Are they actively seeking a solution? What if they don't have a problem? Probably not. Do they have budget authority? It depends who you know. So it's very much, it depends around that. Do they trust you enough for a solution? Probably, because they're in your network. So that is one objection that we can immediately overcome here. For something like warm broadcast, again, they probably trust us enough, but maybe a little bit less. If we're reaching out to, secondary or third tertiary connections on LinkedIn. We are posting from our accounts as if we know people have a problem, but we don't necessarily reach the right audience with that. Then with cold outreach, like cold calling or cold email, we're still going to face some of these problems. We might be targeting somebody with budget authority, but are we always going to hit the inboxes of people that have this exact problem? And do they recognize they have the problem? And are they actively seeking a solution? Maybe not. So these are objections that we have to overcome when we're trying to acquire clients in this way. And then we also have the objection of, do they trust us enough to choose our solution? And when it's a cold audience, it's a lot harder to gain that trust. And the same applies for cold broadcasts. It's very similar. So it kind of leaves you with the question of, if all of these are hard channels to gain clients through, then how can we get a head start here? But of course, you can start reaching out to your network if you have some, but we're going to assume you don't have that network already set up. And we're going to assume that you actually don't have a niche that you've narrowed down on yet. And it's okay at the start to be in this position where you have some AI and automation skills. You're just trying to find demand for your skills. And when I started out, I discovered Upwork. Now, if you've not used Upwork before, it's a way to meet current demand for certain jobs. So, for example, people who are actively seeking a solution, i.e., this objection, would go to Upwork and post an AI automation job on the Upwork platform. They'd have budget authority because they put a budget behind that. And we know immediately they have a problem to solve because they've opened up a job looking for somebody to solve that problem. So, although it is still technically cold outreaches, one-to-one, and we don't know the person, these 4 objections, we use a platform like Upwork. And the only thing we have to prove at this point is, should they trust us enough over our competition to actually build them their solution? So if I was starting out again today, I would absolutely put all my eggs into Upwork to get my first clients and start building momentum from there and niching down as I go. We're going to run through some of the methods now that I use to teach people in my community how to sell on Upwork. But if you're taking this journey seriously, then I'd highly recommend going to school.com/scrapes, as we're about to launch the agency launchpad. And inside here, we've got the complete journey for you to master AI automation. We've got 8 hours and a week by week curriculum that you can easily follow part-time whilst you do other jobs. And we're about to launch the agency launchpad, which has everything I'm about to discuss at a high level in thorough detail in order to help you nail landing your first client, stand out in front of the competition, as well as scale from one client to many, keep them happy, and doing this all with just a few hours a day, and doing this all with just an hour a day. So if you're interested in that, check out the link in the description. But now we'll go over exactly all the ways that you can leverage Upwork to find a client. There are some key tips I'm about to share around Upwork itself that so many people miss when they're setting up their profiles and applying for these jobs. And following these methods, I was able to triple my win rate versus average on sending these proposals. That's 3 times less work for every client that I landed. Now, it doesn't guarantee you results, but following this format will certainly help you stand out in front of the rest of the competition and allow you to tackle that objection of, do they trust us enough to build the solution? This will give them the trust. So the first is around creating an optimized profile. So there are some key headings here that we cover in thorough detail in the community. But first of all, it sounds silly, but so many people on Upwork don't have a professional photo. Now, it doesn't have to be you in a suit. But if you check out my photo here, for example, it's a clear photo of me smiling with a bright background, good lighting. You need to set up your profile to focus only on business value, i.e. the outcomes that you've delivered, instead of the technical solutions. So saying things like transform the data in any way you want, or extracting data from documents, instead of the photo is something that's going to be seen on every single proposal you send. So it is number 1 in creating a good profile. Number 2 is actually just conveying some character, talking in business value, and highlighting exactly what problems you solve. And these are problems, not what solutions you build. Talk less about your end-to-end workflows and more about the business value you generate through your profile, because you need to think about who's actually going to be interviewing you for these roles and who's going to be checking your profile. They are looking for a specialist who can translate into their language, i.e. the business output they're going to get, rather than the technical solution they're going to be looking at the end. When you send a proposal, your headline is one of the first things that appears. So you want to make this succinct, but also it's got to be optimized for people searching for your profile. So if I'm keeping it more broad, like AI agents and automation, then anytime somebody searches for NAN or AI agents, I will appear in that search. If you specialize in something like sales automation, then you might want to make this more specific, keep it concise, and keep it focused on the problems you solve. Then I can't stress enough how important it is to have examples of previous projects and business value you've created. So you need at least 3 to 5 that talk about business problems you've tackled rather than technical solutions. Because when a client comes to your profile, they're always going to look at your work history. And the most important thing as AI automation engineers is showing that we've actually got some relevant experience and shown that we've worked with other clients where we've delivered that business value, particularly when we don't have any feedback, when we have 0 testimonials. Now, in the Agency Launchpad course, we cover why the profile is not the most important thing. So we call this the 60-minute profile, and we give you all the guidelines to absolutely optimize your profile, but do so in 60 minutes because it's worth 5% maximum of every application you send on Upwork. The second tip I have for Upwork is about finding the right jobs. So when I first started, I was particularly bad at seeking any job that would take me. And as some of you might have seen before, I actually earned minus $8 on my first job just to get a testimonial because I vastly underpriced my skills. And it's something that you can avoid doing with the help of my hindsight here. Thankfully, I was able to take a really good review from it, and that propelled me to earn higher and higher sums per hour to the point where I'm now doing $125 an hour. So when you're actually searching for work on Upwork, before you do this, you need to understand your non-negotiables. So if you've got obligations in the day and you can only work certain hours, then you need to set those goals up front and actually stick to them when you're searching for jobs. So if we go end-to-end automation in here, there are a few things we can check to see if a client is right for us and work out whether they are a good client for us to be pursuing this early on, as well as see what some red flags and some green flags are for clients. So for example, you pay for every single application you make on Upwork. So if a client posts a job and they've spent $0, this might be something that you don't want to apply for when you're a beginner, because actually we don't know if this client is actually going to commit and follow through. And if we are having to invest up front to apply to that role, that might be something we consider a red flag. Also, if there's no hourly price on the job, this is going to leave us thinking that actually we could end up paying and try and commit to a certain hourly rate that the client is not comfortable with and end up negotiating us down. So it might be something that you also don't consider as your first client. We have this client down here who's got a 4.9 rating. So ratings are really powerful systems to understand whether it's going to be a good client to work with. And you can go into the role itself and you can see they've got 4.94 of 25 reviews. So this might be a really good client to actually target for your first client. They've spent 26K in the past and they've hired for 50% of the jobs they've posted. So it's likely that they will follow through with this job. Or 50-50, I guess. And you can come down here to the client's recent history and see all the ratings that they've got in the past. So this is a good way to understand green flags and what you should go for. There are also certain tricks of the trade, like applying within the first hour, and we give the tools to apply, to be notified and apply within that first hour as a job comes up, because your win rate is going to be significantly affected by the time it takes you to respond to a job. So in the Agency Launchpad, one of the things we do is set you up for success, give you instant notifications of the jobs that come live so that you can apply to those right away and be highly visible in front of the client when they're considering most to hire that person. So once you understand which jobs you want to apply for, the most important thing is writing winning proposals. And like I said, doing that in a timely fashion. Now, there are proven ways to write stellar proposals, but at a high level, you need to make it tailored. The number of jobs that I've put out onto Upwork and received automated AI responses back does not appeal to me as a client hiring somebody to solve my problem. I want to understand that somebody actually understands my problem and they've thought about an approach on how they'd solve it. If I'm going to hire them for the job, I want somebody that I'm immediately drawn to, and the proposal is the way to do that. And the way we can do that is front running everybody else and actually giving the client a solution preview. So you might generate a flow chart for the client that shows step by step how you'd approach their problem and ask a few questions of the client in there. This really shows the next level of effort here, and is highly recommended when you're writing winning proposals. This would often come with a 1 to 2 minute Loom video. And in the Agency Launchpad, we break down and automate all of the manual work here so you can just tweak and tailor every single application. And you can send a few out a day, which will guarantee you a client in a couple of weeks with very minimal effort. But it looks like you've gone 10 levels above everybody else. You want to prove that you are capable. So include examples of previous experience that relates to this. And then finally, try and book a call in with them so that if they're reading your proposal, they're drawn to actually take the next step with you and book in a call and talk about their solution. So it's all good and well getting a client, and that's hard enough by itself. But then you need to actually deliver great results. The number of people I've taken on jobs from a good proposal on Upwork who've then disappointed me with non-proactive communication, delivering late and leaving me as the client guiding the process, highlights that there's a big gap for people who actually under-promise and over-deliver on Upwork. And you can be one of those by just following a few simple rules. The first is a framework for a clear onboarding process and enabling the client to feel really comfortable that you're the right person to hire. Regular communication. So they shouldn't be asking for updates. You should be proactively giving them updates about where you're at, even if that's just expectation setting that you're a bit delayed. Delivering on time. So like I said, you don't always need to deliver on time, but actually communicating that you're going to miss a deadline is absolutely imperative rather than leaving radio silence. And then once you've delivered great results, you can do exactly what I did, which is actually encouraging your clients, even with small low paid jobs like this $10 one where I lost money here, and encouraging them to give you a good review so that actually your proposal stands above everybody else's next time. If you are 5 stars and you get enough of them, you'll get 100% job success and you will eventually become top rated, which puts you significantly higher in the rankings when you're applying to these different roles. And the whole point in doing this on Upwork is not so that we're forever working on Upwork. It's so that we can set ourselves up with a platform to scale beyond Upwork. So doing these jobs that are significantly easier to get, where we only have to prove that we're the right person to solve the job, will enable us to create really compelling case studies. It will enable us to niche down. We'll have testimonials that we can use for future clients. And not only that, we can take clients into the next phase and offer retainer services or even ask for referrals from those clients. This is so powerful. Every single client that I've worked with on Upwork, 6 or 7 clients, have all come back to me in the future, even after our projects had ended, to ask if I'm available for more work. This is absolutely the way you are able to scale into an agency. And it gives you the time then, once you've mastered this cold outreach on Upwork, to actually then focus on those other channels while you still support those clients. So to sum up, the best way, the absolute best way to get your first AI automation client has got to be Upwork, because it tackles all of the objections up front, apart from whether we're the right person. And then you just need a framework to prove that you're the right person and to follow that every day, sending those proposals. If you're interested in seeing more of this in much greater detail, then check out the link in the description, because we'll be launching the Agency Launchpad, which details this in much greater detail, as well as provides all the automations that you need to make effective proposals and then scale to a larger agency offering very, very soon. Thanks so much for watching.